Good afternoon, students, staff, and faculty. I am Iris Almazon. I'm the program manager for the IIO program. Thank you for being here today, for joining us for today's ICCAE guest speaker session. Our facilitator for today's segment is one of our very own cyber operations adjunct professors, Mr. Harry Cooper. He teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in cyber counterintelligence, information assurance, cryptography, cyber defense, and more at the University of Arizona and other institutions. He has over 13 years of experience in the corporate sector and owns his own technology company. Today, Professor Nazareth will join us in the audience and will help with questions, but Mr. Harry Cooper will moderate our entire segment. Without any further ado, I turn it over to Mr. Cooper.
Good afternoon, everybody. And for those that are not in Arizona, good evening. We have Dr. Stephen Wood here with us tonight. He is currently located in Germany, so he is definitely having a very late night tonight. I just want to go ahead and take a few seconds to introduce him and discuss the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is supporting special operations intelligence with digital forensics. So Dr. Wood is actually a professor adjunct here at Arizona. He currently teaches the cyber investigations and forensics. So if anybody is crossing over from the cybersecurity program, you might possibly have him in a course at a later point. He teaches cybersecurity, again, at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. He's also been a doctoral committee chair. He runs his own national level digital forensics laboratory in Germany and has worked with both NATO and Interpol. So we're going to try to use his experience here a little bit to give you guys a peek into how, again, digital forensics can support intelligence. With no additional questions, I'm just peeking. We don't have anything at this point. I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Wood. Dr. Wood, it is now yours.
Well, thank you. I just need to unmute there real quick. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's an honor to be here speaking to everybody tonight. Hopefully, I can share some information with everybody that will give you a insight into some of the things that happen around the world and some of the ways that digital forensics supports intelligence and vice versa. I will be keeping this at the 10,000 foot level. We can't get down in and talk about tactics, techniques, and procedures and so forth. I will share a couple of cases with you guys to give you a better idea of what's going on out there in the real world. I am at home. I'm in Germany. It's 10:30 at night, so my cats are running around. If they make a little bit of noise, I apologize for that. They do that sometimes. But I think we'll have a very interesting next little bit of time telling you guys about what's happening out there in the world. Real quick, who I am. I'm retired United States Army. I actually joined the Army in 1986, just after I turned 18 years old. And I actually went in as a land combat missile system repairer, and hunting those errors in those missile systems got me interested in investigative work, you know, chasing down that ghost in the machine, following those little tiny clues to figure out what it was that was keeping this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment from working correctly was fun. And those skills actually translated very well into the investigative and intelligence field later on in life. I deployed to Germany in 1987, just after my 19th birthday, and I've been there ever since. I love it here. I'm actually in the middle of the places I need to go to a lot, which are the Middle East and Africa. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, you know, travel's been very limited this last year. So hopefully it's going to pick up again next year and get out and do a little bit more stuff. Actually, I retired from the Army kind of early. I retired when I was 27 years old. After getting wounded the second time in combat, the Army said, "Yeah, you can't play anymore." So I had to trade in my uniform, and luckily I get to work now doing contracting work. I was actually a site lead and instructor at the NATO Special Operations School for several years, and got a great insight into how digital forensics was helping in the fight in Afghanistan and other locations where NATO forces were operating. I also do a lot of work with Interpol in Africa, and that's why I'm gonna try to keep this as a non-military talk. We won't talk about military operations, but we'll talk about how the military inspired techniques can be applied to working in the civilian world. And when I talk about civilian world, it's not just law enforcement, it's also foreign intelligence, domestic intelligence, counterintelligence. All those different entities can use these same techniques to great success. So I'm working at home, so I don't have a big monitor. I have a little one here next to me. So if I'm looking away, I'm not ignoring you guys. I just have to look over here and flip up. So Harry, if you hit the next slide. So people always ask what I look like, and I like to throw in a picture just to have a little fun. That's an actual picture of me with my wooden friend there. It's a carved bear. And some of you guys in the military might recognize the landscape. It's top of a mountain in northern Iraq, about 20 kilometers from the Iranian border. I was over there doing some work, and we had a day off and got to go out and have a little bit of fun and see some things. And I got to take a nice picture there. And one thing in this work, you get to travel quite a bit and see a lot of different, very interesting things. All right. What I'm going to talk about in this is technical intelligence. You guys are aware that there's a lot of different types of intelligence out there. And one of the subparts of technical intelligence, or TechInt, is technical exploitation. And basically, technical exploitation got its start with trying to defeat the IED threat that we were seeing in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. So when you had a post-blast, your teams would go in there, and I'm not using acronyms on purpose. The teams would go in there and evaluate what was left over and try to figure out how the bomb was built and how it was detonated and how it was employed. And that information was used to try to protect our soldiers. And a lot of great things came out of those initial efforts to do that. And it's actually grown greatly. The technical exploitation branch of the NATO Special Operations School teaches all kinds of different skills that at the school there that the guys are able to use in the field. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about how technical exploitation supports targeting. I said the special operations space. And when I talk about special operations in this sense, it's not always military. That's what most people think of first. Special operations, it's always going to be military. No, you're going to see special operations in law enforcement. You'll see it in intelligence. We'll come to a definition here in a second, and you'll see why it makes more sense. But it comes into play not just in uniformed services. Okay. Now, looking at this, when I talk about technical intelligence, I say that it encompasses several different specialties that come together, such as DOMEX, which is document and media exploitation. Think about that as you're getting pieces of paper out of somebody's pocket and getting information off of that. That's a great source of intelligence and information. We're talking about CELEX, which is, the second part of DOMEX is computers. You're looking at computers. You're looking at SD cards. Anything that can hold data can help you and feed back into the intelligence cycle. The information has to come from somewhere. And as we know, a computer or a cell phone it's a reflection of a person's life. Everything they're doing on it during their day, you know, telephone calls, writing, surfing, taking pictures, all that information shows what they were doing and what they were thinking. And that, from an intelligence perspective, is just gold mined. Okay. Now, we also have fingerprinting and DNA. Those are two big ones, for example. You know, a lot of people don't think about that, but these things you find in missions, whether it's military or law enforcement, there's fingerprints. Well, that fingerprint has to be processed and searched and tied to other people, or tied to a person, which can lead you to other people. DNA is the same way. And it's really improved over the years. It's not like it used to be 15 years ago that you had to wait 8 weeks to get a result back. It's possible now, even in some law enforcement settings, that you can get DNA results back in 2 hours. They're starting to sell those machines now. They're not cheap, but I've seen them in work before. That's really, really impressive. Okay. Now, how is the intelligence cycle that you guys probably have seen the most of different than what we're going to be talking about? Well, if we look at the DoD and FBI intelligence cycles from a high level, we see they're cyclical, but they're dynamic. But the biggest point of these is they're requirements driven, which means somebody has to feed into it. I want to know information. Okay. So think about the intelligence from this perspective being, it's about finding out of things we want to know about. So the president says, I want to know what the Chinese premier is having for lunch. Okay. It's a requirement, and it feeds the process and it goes through. It's also about finding information that we want to verify. Okay. And you have people that do this. It's a process that's involving the intelligence community and the people that work in there to circle back around and to get that. Okay. It's not really as adaptive for doing fast operations. And that's where we're going to get a little bit deeper into it. Okay. So if we go to the next slide here, well, excuse me, Dr. Cooper, because I got to get back into that habit. We talk a lot. We know each other. That's why we use first names more often. Okay. So if we look at here, the process, you see the circle, right? You have the collection, the tasking. Somebody comes and says, I want to know this. They task it. It goes through the process. It runs through the circle. It's disseminated. It's fed back. Okay. But it's not a integration of operations and intelligence. Okay. It's not as flexible and able to be used on a more tactical scale. Okay. You don't have to follow all the steps to the letter. Okay. But you have to be careful not to omit critical steps. Okay. Now, what we're talking about more in this is countering illicit networks. Dr. Could you hit the next one? Okay. And you'll see why it makes more sense now. Illicit networks are transnational criminal trafficking networks that require a multi-dimensional strategy to defeat them. Okay. And the things that you look at or you're dealing with here, okay, are like financial type networks. How are terrorists moving money? How do they get stuff from this organization to the next organization? If you can find that out and break that chain, you can defeat that network without ever having to find a single person. You don't have to arrest anybody. You stop the money. It helps. You have drug trafficking networks that you might want to get into. You have, I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. You have the mafia. You have terrorist groups. All these different things are illicit networks that require a little bit more flexibility, that we can take our operational aspects, our intelligent part, have them work together to be able to defeat these groups much quicker. Okay. If I have to do a tasking and wait 6 months so I get an answer back. It's not going to help me that much. Okay. Now, what the military came up with, but it can be used for civilian use, is a specific model. Now, the next slide shows the definition of what special operations is, just so we can see what I'm talking about, okay? And NATO, the Allied Joint Doctrine for Special Operations, defines special operations forces as military activities conducted by specially designated, organized, selected, trained, and equipped forces using unconventional techniques and modes of employment. So if we drop out military from there, we can use that for anything, correct? So that lets us take and mold this up. Oh, you guys are monitoring the chat, right? I'm sorry, I'm used to teaching and looking. So if you take military out of it, you can use that in civilian law enforcement. You can use that in domestic intelligence activities, okay? That definition, like I said, started military, but it is broad enough to be able to expand out into other areas, okay? Now, the targeting model we're going to look at here is called F3EAD, also known as FEED, and that comes from find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate. And what you see here, the difference is we still have a cyclical, circular process, but look at the web between it. Sitting in the middle of these steps is operations and intelligence. They are sitting there working very closely together, which gives you the ability to react much, much quicker to anything that's happening. You're also able to move between different steps as needed, okay? It's not as much of a completely set process that you move around from step to step to get to the next level. You can drop into this anywhere and you can move from place to place, okay? It's typically used by special operations to engage high value individuals, and it's also appropriate to use with conventional operations. It's a very deliberate approach, but it can be time intensive, especially on the intelligence requirements. One big positive of it, it's responsive to intelligence triggers. So if you pick up a piece of information or something comes to your attention, it can feed right in and help you move on down. Now, the most important part of feed is exploit. It is the most critical step of the process. And if we look, we'll see that the definition used is the process of examining, analyzing, interrogating, and processing captured enemy personnel, equipment, and material for intelligence purposes. Okay, we just take out the captured enemy, and we're using the civilian approach too. Okay, it doesn't have to be an enemy. That's just the military term that this was started with. All right. So I'm going to use an example, and hopefully we can, it'll make this a little more clear to you guys. And if you have any questions, please ask them as I'm talking. Okay, just pipe in, and we can take a side trip and talk about different things. We don't have to wait to the very end. So I'm not monitoring that, Iris. If there's something that needs to be talked about, just let me know.
We'll give you a heads up if they have a question.
Say again?
We are actively looking at the chat. Right now, just Harry had posted something in there.
Okay, yeah, I just saw a couple pop up. That's why. Okay. All right, now, what's great about this, it's proven very highly successful in disrupting HVI targets in both military and law enforcement and in intelligence, okay? And it offers the flexibility to conduct operations at a speed which limits the ability of the target to react, which is for military and for civilian applications, what we're looking for. Okay, if we're hunting somebody, you know, if you're hunting a bad person, if they have time to react, then they're going to keep moving. You're going after a target that's not going to be where you expect it to be. And using this methodology, you can speed up the process and get to where you want to be much, much quicker. And I think we lost a slide. Can you go back one? I think. Yep. Okay. Let me just quick jump here. One thing that came out of this methodology is something called EVBO, or evidence-based operations. When we were doing stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan, the military brought in civilian law enforcement to help with military operations. And what was found was we were catching these guys, the bad guys, but using standard military protocols and the intelligence protocols, evidence was not handled properly. So when these guys were being taken to trial, they were not being convicted because the evidence was spoiled and you couldn't use it in the trial, especially with the host nations. Iraq got really bad about that. And that's why we came up with, the military came up with evidence-based operations. And that forces you to use proper evidence handling procedures and to make sure it's going to be able to be used in court. And we always had the EVBO and the intelligence channel. And the problem is, if you went straight intel and didn't do any of those steps, if later you found out, well, I can't do anything about this, I'm going to turn it over to the local nationals and let them prosecute them, nothing would happen. But if you go down the EVBO, you can always use it as evidence, and you can also use it for intelligence. There's nothing that stops you from doing that. Okay. And I'll give you a great example of that causing problems. When we started having the maritime piracy problem off the east coast of Africa, the EU navies started getting involved. And what they were doing is they would go out and they would catch these pirates as they were attacking ships. They would capture them. They would take their cell phones, take their GPS. They would take their computers, everything they had, and they would throw it into their boat, and they would shoot it with 50 caliber rounds and sink it. Okay. Then they bring these guys back to shore, turn them over to local law enforcement, and said, "Do something." Well, the local law enforcement is, "Where's the evidence?" Well, there wasn't any. It was sitting in the bottom of the water. And so, working with Interpol, we started teaching these guys how to process and exploit these digital devices. And they started doing, the local partners started doing a great job. And within a very short period of time, within like 18 months, nearly every jail was full along the coast of Africa where these pirates are operating. And they actually had to build some more jails out on an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean to start putting more of the pirates in. But once these guys realized that they were going to go to jail for a very, very long time, and I'll tell you, a jail in Africa is not a nice place to be. This piracy problem kind of fell off the radar. We haven't seen a successful ship taken in quite a while. And the attacks are down dramatically. Okay. All right. So now stay on the same slide.
Dr. Wood, question?
Yes. Yes.
As the world is becoming more technologically advanced, has your experience and technical exploitation shown you cases where the intelligence and feed cycles have become more interchangeable?
I work with the feed cycle more than I do with the other, because I'm more on the operational side. Does that answer your question? So I can't tell you about the other side of it. I'm just not in that.
Thank you.
But the rapid use or the rapid ability of the feed fits more into what we're doing. Even if some of these high value terrorists that have been taken down over the years, if it's not processed locally, it takes forever to get the information back, and it's not as useful. One of the big things we saw that helped increase success rate was pushing this down to the team level, that you have a soft team that would hit a target and do the collection and the exploitation as close to that target as possible. I've actually in the work done exploitation on site to start getting information to be able to get the next thing done. And we've actually used it to drive our questioning on site, and having that little bit of intelligence that you gleaned in a fast exploitation on target can yield great results. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, I think our audience members just wanted to glean a little bit more from the intel side, but we understand if you're not able to articulate to it. Thank you.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's talk real quick about the find. Find is the process of determining what your target is going to or your target is going to be. Okay. So basically, you're looking here trying to determine what's going to happen. All right, you know that somebody's been making bombs. You don't know who they are, so you start trying to find out who they are and who your target's going to be. Okay, and fix, once you know who that target is, that's where you take and start using the full weight of your intelligence collection capability to try to get enough information so you can fix that target in space and time. So why do you need to fix them in space and time? Well, if you're going to prosecute that target, you have to know where they are and when they're there. Otherwise, you're just going to hit an empty hole. So you're using all your intelligence efforts to get that information. And one great thing about that SOF kind of developed and uses extensively is something called federating. And that's spreading out your intelligence collection across the spectrum of different agencies out there. So they don't have to do it organically. The soft guys or the LE guys can task other agencies for help. And I'll talk about that a little bit here in an example. So you're not trying to do it all your own. And if you've got 5 different agencies that are out there gathering information, your chances of getting a positive result back quicker increase dramatically. And yep. And the next is finish. Finish is a misnomer. A lot of people think it means go in and destroy. Well, you don't have to destroy. Finish can be definitely kinetic if you're doing special military, but it's also arresting the person. It's shutting down the operation that they had. Finish is simply finishing a specific mission, excuse me. Okay. Exploit is the main effort, as I mentioned, and basically the overall aim of exploitation is to get enough actionable intelligence and or prosecutorial evidence to keep feeding our process as fast as possible. The quicker we get data, the quicker we feed it back in, the faster we're going to get moved to the next phases, okay, and get our mission accomplished.
Sir, have you run into any issues with the intelligence sharing in the process of efforts to collect technical exploitation?
Big time. Five Eyes is always a huge problem. As soon as it moves up into that chain, a lot of the guys would lose it. A lot of the NATO member countries, they would collect stuff and they would send it up and never hear it back. That's why they started exploiting stuff themselves. They would make copies of everything, forward it up through the chain back to, I won't use acronyms, back to the stateside locations, but they also had their own copy that they could use because it's still, at point of collection is unclassified. All right, so the analyze phase is where you're taking the information that we got from find, fix, and finish and exploit, and it gets turned into intelligence. You know, finding information is one thing, making it usable intelligence is something else. And that's another process unto itself, okay? We won't get too deep into it. Next is dissemination. And one thing about this process, when we disseminate, we want to get it out to a much wider network, okay? Information that you glean, if it doesn't get to the right people, it's useless. So that's why we try to get it out further than you might see in the normal Intel cycle, the normal Intel process that we were talking about. This, you want to get out to more people. The soft team might send it out to conventional forces. They might send it out to law enforcement. Law enforcement goes in the same direction. They might share it with whoever needs it, okay? Because information or intelligence that's not shared with the right person is useless. Okay, let's hit the next slide and we'll start using an example. All right. So this is something I worked on years ago. There was a hidden website hosting information of crimes against children. You can imagine what that is. There were hundreds of thousands of pictures and videos. There were hundreds of members. And the site actually offered a abuse to order for its members, okay? And I'll explain that here just a little bit in a second, okay? So no, stay back there. I'll just give a quick overview. Yeah, the website was a hidden web server, and you couldn't really see it from the internet if you didn't know it was there. They used code names and secret words to hide their true identities of the users and to mask what they were doing. They basically pretended to be a children's website for playing and that type of thing. So it was very hard to see what they were doing from the outside. New members were extensively vetted and were made to upload large amounts of illegal material to even be considered for membership. And these potential members were made to perform tasks that law enforcement would be forbidden to do. So you can't, law enforcement, we weren't able to become a member because we would have had to done things that we would not have been allowed to do. It just wasn't possible, okay? And the abuse of order service, they used live streaming. The members could say, hey, I want to see this, and somebody would do it. And we're made aware of this by human source, which allowed us to start the fix phase of the cycle. Next slide, please. Yeah. Because we already had our target, so we jumped right into fix. Okay, we knew who we were looking for. Okay, the source gave us enough information that we were able to use multiple agencies to start looking for who they were, using domestic intelligence, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, immigration, tax authorities. Everybody was involved to gather information to find out who they were. Well, once we identified who the people were, as much as we could find, we attained search warrants. We had simultaneously searches that were executed, and hundreds of electronic devices were seized and were brought to the exploitation phase, okay? One of the admins actually had over 100 external drives. One person, okay? Now, during exploitation, it was discovered that there was a super admin, but there was no information on who they were, okay? So out of our exploitation, we moved over to analyze, and none of the identified users or admins that we had arrested would tell us who the super admin was. They were scared of them, okay? Now, during the analysis phase, an internal chat log from this group was examined, and there's an entry where the super admin had stated they missed a day of college to have a dental procedure done that was very, very uncommon. So this fact was disseminated, and it led to a new person becoming the target, or this person becoming a new target in the find phase. We knew what they were, but not who they were. So we started digging into it a little bit more. And what happened in fix is we started moving through all these different agencies, got together and contacted every insurance company in the country. to see who had that procedure done on that specific day. Now, they got information back, but there was actually, surprisingly, multiple people that had that done. Well, using additional information that was found during the process, it was possible to narrow it down to a single person, okay? So now having that single person identified, we moved into finish. The person's house, work, everything else they had was hit. We took all their electronic devices, and there was hundreds of drives, computers, cell phones seized from this admin, okay? This fed back into the exploitation cycle. All people that could be identified during this in analysis went through, and this process kept running through to every person that was able to be identified was found, arrested, and convicted, okay? And this process ran through for a long time with a lot of different people working together to make it happen, okay? But that's how quickly it goes, and how the process will take these different pieces of information and let you move through this cycle and work much quicker, okay? Because it's not just one process that's running through from start to finish. You stop and move and get the different pieces done until the mission is accomplished, okay? Any questions on that?
Yeah, so we have a question from the audience that kind of speaks to this initiative here. Throughout your career, have you found it easier to work with local law enforcement or military players in terms of information sharing?
It's getting better. It's getting better. It used to be everybody wanted to keep stuff together and not share. I find it's getting easier, especially in the world we live in now with the threats from terrorism. If we don't share information, we're going to not stop the people.
And we have a follow-on question.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, that was it.
And when coming up against those information blocks, what are ways that you have utilized to overcome those?
You need very high-ranking people working with you. A lot of the times, I work with very senior prosecutors and government people. They can usually get those log jams done. But honestly, a lot of the best information is shared over a cup of coffee between two people that get together in a break room. It's who you know, and you can exchange quite a bit more information that way.
Great, thank you.
All right. Let's talk a little bit here about another example, and this is a counterterrorism example. It's not military. This was a civilian group that I was working with. When ISIS first came into Iraq, they pushed up into the Kurdish areas, and the Peshmerga pushed them out. Okay, those guys don't play. They did not get anywhere inside their territorial boundaries for too long. Okay. Now, once they pushed these guys back, these ISIS fighters left the area littered with literally hundreds of IEDs. And most of these were VBIEDs, which are vehicle borne. So basically you have these cars all spread around the cities, different places that are loaded up with explosives, and they have remote triggers. And what the ISIS would do is they would detonate these triggers when it would cause the most damage to the locals. So if a military patrol came by one, they'd blow it up. If a bunch of civilians were around it, they would blow it up. Okay. And they did that using remote triggers. And if we look on the next slide, we see here, this is a trigger that was taken off of an actual VBIED outside Erbil in northern Iraq. And when you look at it, it doesn't look like much, okay? It just looks like a phone with some wires coming out of it, a battery, and some kind of a red thing sitting there, okay? Now, once we take it and pull this into our technical exploitation, we feed this right into our cycle and bring it into the exploitation phase, okay? We have a piece of equipment. We don't have any context to it other than we know it came off the bomb, and we're going to bring it in and feed it. Now, I've anonymized these pictures a little bit because these are, like I said, real pictures. You guys will see some things in here. You know, so there's some writing. I had to take that out. I took the numbers out that were on some of the things, but you'll still get the overall picture of what's going on. Okay, so that's what it looks like from the outside. Let's start exploiting it. Let's jump to the next screen. Okay, well, when you flip that little red box over, you see it's got a bunch of writing on it. Okay, and that writing can be examined and give us some useful information that might be helpful for us. Now, what I'll share about this is these devices were built that they needed a specific ringtone to be installed on the phone for it to work. That had to be selected. It had to ring between a specific set of times, and it had to be hung up. So that means it had to ring between X and Y times, and the person had to hang up in that time, and then it would detonate. And the reason they did that was a countermeasure to prevent the Kurds from just dialing every phone number in a block and trying to set these bombs off remotely. Okay, and it was actually pretty smart, and it complicated things a little bit for the guys. And you look over on the other side, you see the inside of the device, of the detonator, the logic of it. And I only showed the one side. I didn't want to show the other side. But you can see this was sent back to Alabama and processed by the FBI. And it tells them a lot. They can go back and look and see maybe who built this and maybe identify a person based off of this. That's what their job is. They have a special lab there that does that. Okay. So let's look on the next one. And this is another one that you see it's yellow there. It came off of another device. And if we flick the next screen, we'll see once we get in there, we still have the same instructions. So this was really, really simple. This thing just showed up like this. Anybody could take it and put it into use and process it. So these came off of a device and didn't explode. So I've got can give me information, right? So I exploit that. It's going to tell me who the provider is. It's going to tell me what the phone number is. And once I got a phone number, I have a selector I can feed back into my intelligence cycle. If you look at the directions, it actually told them to only use a SIM card from a specific provider. Well, knowing that, I can go in at the national level through Intel, and I can block all SIM cards from that provider in my country. Okay, and these are things that they go through that cycle. That's how you drop down from exploit and to feed it to another agency or another group that can help you get to your end goal. Now, other parts of exploitation that helped in this, well, they weren't done very well. They didn't wear gloves. So what do you think we got off of these? We got fingerprints, we got DNA. So it helps you identify where this thing has been, who made it, who did it move through, okay? And these are great pieces of evidence that you get through the different parts of your exploitation, okay? So all that goes back into that cycle and feeds through and comes back until you get to a point where you can do your finish, go in and find those people and move it around, okay? And get them stop doing the bad things that they were doing, okay? So I'm not going to go into the tiny parts of that, so we have time to discuss some things. But on an interesting side note, I was on a mission in Africa doing something completely different than this. And we discovered that these triggers were actually being produced locally in Iraq by a Al-Qaeda offshoot, and they were sending them over to Iraq to use by ISIS. And that's just one of those freak things that you find, but it feeds right back into your cycle. It becomes intelligence, and that process just keeps moving along, okay? It doesn't stop until that mission is over, until your problem that you're facing is done. The guys in Afghanistan right now today are still using this same process, and they're probably going after targets today that we identified 15 years ago, the first person in that chain. Okay. All right. That's pretty much a broad overview, 10,000 foot view. If you guys got any questions, I'm here.
So there are some questions on the board.
Okay.
In feed, leaders usually establish targeting priorities. The intelligence system provides the direction to the target, and the operations system performs the decisive operations necessary to accomplish the mission. Saying that, besides the exploit step in the cycle, which other step do you find most important?
For which aspect? Because you're right, they are both working together. I'll look at the thing too to see if I get it.
Just other than you already kind of expounded that the exploit step was a most critical step in the process of a feed.
Right.
Do you see if is there any other one in the cycle that you deem most critical in order to, execute your mission?
I think disseminate is important, because that's something, somebody asked that question a minute ago, sharing information. If you don't share the information, you've got 100 different entities out there working on the same goal and all trying to do the same thing, working for different sets of information. And one person feeding that tidbit of information that you got through all those phases can help maybe 5 of those guys find what they're looking for. A great example would be if I take a phone off of somebody, I extract it, and there's pictures of, let's say, a government building. Well, it means nothing to me. But when I feed that back into the cycle, there might be this person over here. Oh, I'm looking for a spy that's been doing this. Another person might be looking for somebody planning attack in that location. So if you don't get it disseminated to the right people, it's really all for naught. Once you scale it out from a single team.
Right.
Did that answer it? Or?
It does. Thank you, sir. I have another question from the panel here.
Okay.
How would you characterize this type of exploitation as signals intelligence or cyber collections forensics?
It's not signals intelligence at all. Signals intelligence is something we would use in finding our targets and locating where people are. This is cyber. Exploitation is digital, and it's classic forensics.
All right, thank you. I have another one, 2-part. When you collect electronic equipment, do you take efforts to preserve the vital data for forensic purposes?
Yes, as much as possible. Yeah, I'm looking at here too. As much as possible. A lot of times you might not get it in a state that you can do that. If I roll up a person who just got off an airplane and their phone's turned off, I'm not going to be able to get anything like that. If I hit a house at 6 a.m. and the person has their computer turned off at night, you're not going to get anything. If it's possible, yes, but most of the time you're not going to do it.
They provided examples as well, such as ensuring the phone stayed charged or prioritizing digital analysis before anything else while it is on, or
yes,
taking some information for running a computer laptop before unplugging it, removing it from the target location.
Very good question. Yes, phones will be put into airplane mode if you don't have any other way to do it. Preferable is using a Faraday, not the little bags. We have much more quality stuff that does work. A lot of the ones you'll see on the market today just don't work. Yes, if I come up on a computer, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a USB device, and I'm going to get critical information off of it, which will identify for me, is that computer encrypted? You do see encryption much more, and if you turn that thing off, you're not going to see anything once you get back. So we have special tools we use, and we use the human interface device USB sticks, which leave very few tracks on the system. But yes. Yeah, that's part of it. It's a triage capture. Yeah, triage live capture. But I'll image devices as they're running on target too. I'll do that before I grab the memory. If it's a mounted encrypted container, it's gotten better. It used to be really hit and miss if you tried to image the RAM. Most of the time it would cause the system to crash. So we used to always image it on site, but it's gotten much better, and I'm much more confident in doing RAM captures. And when you do that, you've got all the keys you need to open up those containers again later.
Thank you, sir. I have a question actually for curiosity's sake. You kind of expounded on TechInt as a niche intelligence discipline. Can you expound upon like what it is? Because I think a lot of our students would want to know about that.
Technical intelligence, when they first started trying to recruit me for that back in the old days, because I retired in '95, and they were trying to pull me over into that. It was more weapons. If a weapon system was captured, what does it do? How does it work? That's where it came out of. And now technical intelligence at the NATO level, at least, and they are pretty much at the top of this for worldwide military type operations, especially special operations side. It covers digital, it covers cellular, it covers fingerprints, it covers DNA, it covers identifying chemical agents. You've probably seen some of the labs we have running around out there, and it's amazing what we can teach a guy to do. We've taught operators how to do chip off of phones in 2 days, and something that they can use out in very, very specific operations. It's not something you're going to do that often, but that's technical intelligence. That's what I see it as.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Now, from your experience, I'll ask back, have you seen different? Because it changes so quickly. Is that still the same way it's being seen?
Yes, pretty much. I think when we talk about tech, it encompasses so many other intelligence disciplines. We can obviously SIGINT. We can also talk about we can also talk about GeoWin as well, and Mazint. They have it can reach different aspects of those intelligence disciplines. So it's pretty much the same. It's just on how you apply it to what you're trying to do.
Right. That's what. Yeah. And for this, for what I see it as, it's that very narrow, because that's just from my background, what I was doing.
Yeah, Dr. Wood, this is Professor Nazareth here. Great talk so far. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
You know, TechInt is pretty broad, as Charles Walker has said. You know, and a lot of folks, it depends on what application you're looking at. Is it a law enforcement perspective? Is it a military mission perspective? And then, is it strategic, operational, or tactical? I mean, if you're looking at strategic issues, then, you know, TechInt would really apply to nuclear exploitation, ballistic missile systems, things that can reach out and touch people at the strategic level.
Yep.
Operational and tactical, it can also encompass all those things, plus everything that Dr. Wood's talking about when you're trying to find, fix, finish actual targets for kinetic effects or even non-kinetic effects, when you're trying to exploit and understand more about a person of interest or a target. TechInt can even describe those activities that one would take to understand how a weapon system operates, exploiting the functionality and the internal mechanisms or inner workings of that weapon system. So it's pretty broad. I hope that kind of gives you a baseline. And you're right, Dr. Wood, it's a niche kind of application within the different types of things that you're doing.
Right.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Wood?
We have a comment for Dr. Wood. Thank you, Dr. Wood, and indeed, sir. I just realized with timely operations, where, say, special forces personnel are on site, if someone doesn't have digital forensics experience, a great deal of information can be lost, from active connections in memory to, as Dr. Wood mentioned, the ability to access the file system altogether on a device. So thank you. We appreciate you joining us today.
I think it's been very, very fun.
All right.
You
Well,
know, just to follow up, Dr. Woods. Oh, sorry, Charles. Just to follow up on that comment you just made, Iris. You know, if you don't have the capability to collect or preserve the data or information, you're right. You know, a lot of things may be lost. That's why commanders at all levels, leaders at all levels, should be cognizant that this capability is out there, and so find a way to preserve it so that others could exploit it, you know, in the future, if it's operationally feasible.
and following along with what Craig said, we here in the speaker series are specifically showcasing that by having someone like Dr. Wood come in and talk with you guys. The cybersecurity program and the intelligence program work hand in hand at Arizona, because we understand that at the cybersecurity level, we need intel people to help us. And on the intel side, you need cyber people to help. So maintaining that back and forth between the disciplines, hopefully you will see the benefits of that.
Very true.
All right. Well, I want to thank Dr. Wood for coming and speaking with us this week. If anybody has any questions they think of after this, you can feel free to email them to Professor Nazareth, and he will get those to Dr. Wood so he can get you an answer to that question. Craig, Iris, is there anything you guys want to go over before we finish off for the evening?
Yes, we would like to
Iris,
thank all of
yeah,
students, staff,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
faculty for being here today. Dr. Wood, thank you very much for providing us this topic, this very interesting topic. And then for all of our attendees, our next speaker session is in November, and it's a law enforcement speaker with Major Pinal from the ACTIC, the Arizona ACTIC Center. Please join
Counterterrorism.
us at that time for further discussion. Craig, over to you.
So did everybody catch that? November 17th at 2:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Arizona time. Major Jennifer Pinow with the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center. Now this is going to be an outstanding talk as well, because you're going to get this insight into this network of law enforcement capability that's not only local here in Arizona, but how the ACTIC reaches out to the intel community. So, and Dr. Patrick Tortorisi will be facilitating that. So again, I really want to thank Dr. Wood, Dr. Cooper, Charles Walker, and Iris Almazan for facilitating this talk. Again, if any students, if you're interested in any follow-up questions, please let them come our way to Iris Almazan or myself so we can coordinate that and organize that, the responses. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I welcome all questions.
And I will say, just as a PSA, please, everybody, do remember to vote next Tuesday.
Already done.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks.